Hi. Kind of creepy. Anyway, this entire Halloween event has been very, very draining. Everything we've done so far has been a lot of fun, but it's also been a lot of work. But we are past the lawn series segment of the event, which means that it's easy video time. That means short one-off videos, and of course what I promised at the beginning of the Halloween event, that not every single thing we were doing was going to be video game related. Well, as you could probably have guessed by the title of this video, this is one such video. Today, I want to tell you about the scariest thing that I've experienced myself. And I haven't really told this story anywhere. I think I've alluded to it a few times in the past. You know, I used to speak about how I've been on a handful of impromptu kind of paranormal investigation type situations. I think this is one, though, that has stuck with me the most because it's the one and only time that I've ever had direct interaction with something that I couldn't see. Or at least that's what I think happened. So I'm going to be completely transparent here. Most of the regulars already know this because I've already spoken about such things before, but I do believe in spirits, human and inhuman. I do believe in something past this life. Perhaps even I guess what most people would say, a higher power. Though I personally have some weird nuances around this kind of stuff. For instance, a lot of people call it supernatural, as in something beyond the natural, but I don't see why anything that happens in reality should be considered past natural. I don't know why it would be unnatural at all, but whatever. Anyway, I won't get into all of that. That would be a ramble and a half or an hour and a half. But yeah, even though I've had a ton of personal experiences, most of them pretty small, not very significant, could be explained away in many other ways as well, I do have several instances where things were just extremely weird, and I want to tell you about those. And then I'm also going to tell you about the time that I believe I had direct interaction with something. I don't know what, but something. I don't know how long this video is going to be. I guess you will, because the time bar is literally right down there. Yep, right there. So I guess you'll have a better idea of how long this is going to be than I, so you need to run to the kitchen or the bathroom or whatever, you know. Also, this entire video is just going to be my face, so I'm sorry, and also you're welcome. Whichever one of those applies. Probably the first one. Well, I did have a notepad text document with some bullet points in it that I was going to use to keep myself on track. I'm an idiot, and I apparently didn't save it, so I'm doing this off the top of my head. Also, because a lot of these stories involve other people, I am not going to volunteer their personal information, so I'm going to obfuscate a lot of names, a lot of details around those people, but the actual events themselves are things that actually happened. And if you don't believe me, then just take this as creepy stories or something, whatever. I'm not here to try to change your mind if you don't believe in this stuff. However, they are all things that actually happened, like real life stuff, so don't expect a crescendo or a credits rolled moment or anything like that. Also, I wouldn't consider these situations to be as weird or creepy to me. If I had explanations, don't expect any answers as to what any of this stuff was either, because I have no idea. So a little bit of backstory on myself, which will segue directly into the first story. This will be brief, I promise. Kind of always just believed that this kind of stuff happens. To me, it's not really a scary thing if spirits exist, regardless if they're human or inhuman. I've never really considered that a scary thing. I've always just kind of assumed that they did. You know, no offense to any, you know, spiritual things that might hear me say this, but hey, you can never be too careful. To give an example, it's kind of like I've always kind of seen it the same way that I see like microbial life or something like that. Like, yeah, I can't see it, but I know it's there. And while microbial life has direct, empirical, irrefutable evidence of its existence, and a lot of the paranormal doesn't, I still have just kind of thought of it ever since I was a wee little kid as just a fact of life. Yeah, these things are out there, whatever. I did grow up in a very spiritual home, however, so I guess that probably explains some of that. I've always believed in souls and the afterlife, etc. But it wasn't until I was about 8 or 9 years old that I started to pay attention more and start to ask questions. I still didn't find it scary, but yeah, I found it fascinating more than anything. Not that I was completely comfortable with it either. I don't mean to paint a picture like I was some type of fearless, bulletproof prodigy of the paranormal world or something like that. There were times that it was very unsettling, but nothing I would say I was downright terrified of. But when I was about 10 years old, I got introduced to a group that I'm sure is a huge influence on most people interested in the paranormal by now. So when I say this, they'll probably know exactly who I'm talking about. But it was TAPS, T-A-P-S, TAPS. It stands for the Atlantic Paranormal Society. They now have tons of branches all over the US. I know they had a show go international at one point, but I don't know if TAPS itself has gone international. But they at least have groups, hubs, HQs all over America, pretty much, with teams and teams and teams of people going out to different places and helping people with stuff. They were my biggest influence when I was a kid. And then later on, I started meeting other groups and individuals, both just on the internet or whatever, and personally. Yeah, so that's pretty much what has shaped my approach towards these things, meaning that I have more of a inquisitive, sort of validation-oriented mindset around this stuff. I guess another way to explain that is that I'm always trying to find ways to disprove it, not prove it. And that only got reinforced later in life when I got a lot more interested in science in general, and I learned that the scientific method literally calls for you to try to disprove your hypothesis. And only when you no longer can you start calling it something, valid. So that's kind of always been my approach towards these things. Luckily, I had the first seeds of that mentality at the point where the first thing that I'm going to bring up today happened to me. It wasn't the first time that something had happened, but it was the first one that was actually interesting. I just realized that maybe having that text document would have been a good idea because then I could just refer to that for my obfuscated names. Let's just say J. I'm just going to choose random letters of the alphabet. So congratulations, letter J, you're first. There was me and Jay. We were in a hallway of a house. This house belonged to a family member, so it was a familiar home. And we were in the hallway. It was late at night. We were talking. There was only 2 lights on. There was the bedroom that I was staying in, and then there was the bedroom that Jay was staying in. And it happened so fast that, quite frankly, neither one of us really had time to be scared. Nor was it really something that was terrifying. It was just really weird. We were both standing there talking, and suddenly this little white ball of fog, I'm not really sure what the heck to call it, because it happened so fast, I don't even know if I could give an accurate description. It almost looked like if you had a shiny floor and a reflection were to shine across it from a distant flashlight, but it was perfectly symmetrical, held its shape, it didn't change size or anything. It was maybe shin height, so not very tall, and it just kind of shot up through the dark living room into the hallway where we were standing, immediately turned around, shot back through the kitchen and into the room on the other side of the kitchen, and into the dark. It wasn't self-illuminating, so it showed up and then it just turned around and poof, gone. Like I said, this happened very, very quickly. So it was like over the course of a second to 2 seconds, it was very, very fast. And I remember that we were both kind of standing there, and after it happened, we just kind of looked at each other like, did you see that? They're like, yeah, I did see that. I was hoping you didn't. But I mean, it was just kind of weird. I remember we turned around and grabbed our flashlights and shone them into the living room and the kitchen, and there wasn't anything there. The people that owned the house, they had a dog. He was small and white. So at first we're like, oh, he escaped the bedroom. But there was no running sound. Also, he wouldn't have ran away from us. It didn't look anything like him either, besides just the color and potentially the size. It was just very strange. And never found any explanation for that. This house was out in the countryside, so it's not like there was tons of cars driving around. And even when they did, the house was quite a ways away from the road, and there were open yards on each side. So it's not like it would have been a car shining through the trees and then you just can't see the car anymore. No, nothing could sneak up on that house. So yeah, I have no idea what in the heck it was. I get used to hearing these words. It never happened again. I don't remember how much longer after that this happened, but there was another incident where I was there alone, and I was in I'm realizing some flaws in my obfuscation, but whatever, I still haven't mentioned names or locations, so it's fine. It was my parents' house where I grew up. Okay, there you go. And I was laying in bed, and I was probably playing video games. It was probably summer vacation, and it was like 10, quarter after 10, 10:30 in the morning, somewhere around there. I started hearing this weird noise. It just kind of came out of nowhere. I was laying in the bed, which the bed faced towards the wall, that on the other side of that wall was the living room, and to the left of that wall was outside the house. So in the corner of that room, I started hearing this sort of breathing noise. I don't really know how else to explain it. I define it as breathing simply because it was rhythmic. It was like a pressure in and pressure out, just kind of alternating. But it didn't really sound like breath though, which is why to this day I still wonder if it was like, I don't know, some type of atmospheric thing or temperature thing. I have no freaking clue because I never heard it before or after this. But the thing that's kind of shocking about this one though is that it literally sounded like I have to demonstrate, don't I? I'm sorry, this is the only time I'll do this in the microphone in this entire video. But it was very much like a kind of a Temu Darth Vader apparently. It was kind of weird because it sounded like it was outside. So naturally I went outside. I went to go see what it was. Standing outside, right outside the window, right by the corner of the room where I was hearing it, I couldn't hear a thing. There was nothing. So then I go back in the house and I can hear it again before I even get to my room. So I go in my room and I still hear it, same corner. I think at that point I did have a computer set up on that corner of the room. So I checked that. Computer wasn't making noise. The speakers weren't even turned on. The monitor wasn't on. Back then, you know, sleep mode actually worked on computers, imagine that. And it was in sleep mode. It wasn't doing anything. I remember I checked the rest of the house. I even went back outside, looked all around the house. There was this little thing that you could use to see under the house as well. So I checked under there, nothing. Go back in the house and it's still there. This must have persisted for like 20-30 minutes, somewhere around there. It was a long time. Just kept happening and I had no idea why. And then as quickly as it showed up, it just disappeared. Never heard it again. Never found out what it was either. I still to this day wonder if it was like some kind of, I don't know, because the weird thing is that no matter what explanation I come up with, there's always a flaw. Like if it was an animal, why was it under there for 30 minutes making weird breathing noises? And why didn't I see it when I went to go look and I checked everywhere? If it was mechanical or something like that, ventilation or heat, atmosphere expansion or shrinking, etc., whatever stretch of the imagination you want to use on a scientific level, why did it only happen once? Why did it never happen again? Why was it so consistent and rhythmic? What's funny though is that in this instance, even if you wanted to say, oh, well, perhaps it was a paranormal entity of some kind, why did it stand in the corner of the room and breathe for 30 minutes and then disappear? Like even that doesn't make sense. Like this is just weird all around, and I have no explanation for it. It's just very strange. As you can imagine though, it made it a little bit difficult to sleep at night for a little while, I'll admit it. But both of those instances pale in comparison to probably the scariest thing that ever happened to me in that house. And what's really funny about this is that it didn't scare me while it was happening. It's only now thinking back on it that it's like, okay. So for those who don't know, I have clinical depression and anxiety, and basically all that means is that my brain works a little bit differently than most other people's. It's certainly not debilitating or paralyzing or anything like that. It's just something I have to live with. It's fine. But there is bright sides to these conditions, however, because the thing is that it normally happens in brains that, to put as briefly as possible, are extremely vivid. And there's tons of proof to that statement as well. Well, not proof, but validation to that statement as well, because, you know, you always hear the artsy-fartsy types. There are always like the troubled minds and all this other stuff. I don't know, there just seems to be a connection with having a very vivid artistic mind and these things that I believe are incorrectly labeled mental illnesses, but I won't get into that nuanced conversation here. But I've always had extremely vivid dreams as a result of this. And because of that, it's not very uncommon that I have very, very vivid, detailed experiences within dreams. It's also not uncommon that sometimes I wake up and my brain is still in a dream state. They call this lucid dreaming. This is something that anybody can go through and commonly do. But because my dreams are so vivid, plus the lucid dreaming, it can be a little bit hard sometimes to figure out if what happened to me in the morning was real or not. Most of the time, the answer is no. In fact, as far as I know, all of it is no. So keeping that in mind, it will be very easy to see why dismissing this next story up to the point where it happened and it was over would be extremely easy. But then I have something to let you in on after that. Assuming you don't already know about it, perhaps as soon as I start describing what happens, you'll have a oh shit moment and maybe you've experienced the same thing because apparently... Well, anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. I don't know how old I was. I was old enough to have already been exposed to the paranormal and stuff that happens in it. Enough experience as well to realize that most of the things you come across, assuming it's legitimate paranormal activity, is most likely just a human spirit, which means they're just a person. They just don't have a body that you can see, at least not all the time. So it's usually not that scary. However, in this instance, it was more comforting than anything. You might be expecting a sentimental approach to this story, but that's not what I'm talking about. It was like, I just wasn't concerned at all while this was happening. Even though, looking back now, I definitely should have been. There isn't much build up to this story because it's actually a pretty short snippet of my life. Basically, I woke up in the middle of the night and I felt like I was being watched. It wasn't like a scary kind of feel like you're being watched. It's almost like if you're ever like a really young kid that was sick or something, and sometimes you'd wake up in the middle of the night and one of your parents were there watching over you, just seeing if you were okay. It was that feeling. It was just like there was just somebody there. It wasn't a cause for concern. There was just somebody there. So I roll over and I look at the foot of my bed, and the house that I grew up in had a wood burning stove. Well, it wasn't wood burning, it was wood pellet burning, but anyway, close enough. But it was in the next room, and of course they have the glass front on them, so the fire illuminates the room. With the stove being in the next room, of course you had to sleep with your door open, otherwise the heat couldn't get in. So that's how I was able to see what I saw as clearly as I did. At the foot of my bed, there was just a silhouette outline. And it wasn't scary. It looked like a person. It was just a person, just standing there. And when I saw it, I guess in my brain, I either thought that it was my dad, or I wasn't really thinking about the shape that I was seeing that much. I just remember thinking that it was really weird. He was wearing a coat and a hat. And I didn't say anything, I didn't get up, I didn't feel scared or anything, so I just rolled over and went back to sleep. Now, anybody who's heard of this phenomenon is already have their red flags up, because the thing is, what I would find out years later kind of changed my perspective on this entire endeavor. As I said, I thought it was weird that my dad was wearing a coat and hat. A lawn coat with a collar that raises up, and a flat-brimmed hat with a wide top to it, so kind of square-shaped above the brim. Well, first of all, I don't think he owned anything like that ever, let alone at that point. What's even more unsettling is about a decade later, I would find out about a little phenomenon known as the Hat Man entity. I didn't name it, okay? Yeah. But as direct and underwhelming as that name is, it's this phenomenon where people see a all-black silhouette figure that appears to be wearing a lawn coat with a raised collar, wearing a wide-brimmed hat. Nobody knows what the heck it is. People see it in all sorts of different places at different points in their life. Some people believe it's a demon. Other people believe it's just an entity type. Well, what's funny is that I'm a little bit more unsettled by this, because there is one prevailing theory that it is more or less some form of entity that preys upon your sort of, I don't want to use the word fear, but because it doesn't necessarily have to be fear. Again, I wasn't even scared in the moment, if that's really what happened, right? But some people think that there's this sort of introductory spirit, if you will, I don't know how else to word that, for people who are just starting to enter into that world on a spiritual basis themselves. Almost like a sign that you have entered into something. Now, considering I've never seen a full-blown entity with my own eyes ever since, I don't really know if I believe in this. But, I mean, it's called the unknown for a reason, right? So any of these theories are just as likely as the next, but I don't know. It's just really weird. Guess what? Like I said at the beginning, you get used to hearing these words. It never happened again. So I have no idea what that was, but it's kind of funny that it took me like 10 years or more to realize that that was actually a concerning event. I don't even think I told anybody the next morning. I have told people this story before, but I don't think I told anybody the next morning or anything. I just kind of, because at the time I chalked it up to just a vivid imagination, lucid dreaming. Maybe I was still half asleep. I just didn't really care. I don't know. It's very weird. I remember the first person I ever heard talk about this, funnily enough, was a YouTuber. His name was Corey Shear, and he was talking about how he's seen it multiple times, and that he hates even talking about it because he's afraid talking about it will make it show up again. All this other stuff. Like, it's just kind of funny because watching a random YouTube video and then suddenly somebody starts talking about something that you've experienced that you wrote off a long time ago, just kind of assumed it was nothing, and yet they describe exactly what you saw, the exact same kind of feeling and setting and everything, and it's like, well, that was weird. It made it a lot more real. Could it have just been lucid dreaming? Perhaps, but it's weird that lucid dreaming has produced the exact same results in a lot of other people's. Plus, there's also been lots of instances where these people have seen these things, like in the middle of their work shift at a warehouse that's brightly lit or something like that. You know, it's not like it's always people coming out of a sleep. But yeah, it's called the Hat Man phenomenon. You can look this up if you want to. The artist renditions that I have seen are all pretty accurate to what I've seen. Most of them have the collar down, though, when what I saw had the collar up. Also, a lot of them put in eyes, like glowing eyes or whatnot, but I don't remember seeing any eyes at all. It was literally just a black outline, like a silhouette. There was zero detail to it whatsoever, except for what seemed to be the outline of, like, lawn baggy sleeves with the upturned collar and the brim hat. I don't know. It was really weird. Really weird. Okay, so while that one was probably the most shocking in retrospect, there's one that was very shocking in real time, and to this day I have no idea what the hell it was, and I've spoken to my parents about it several times. They don't know what the hell it was. Probably kind of, it has a possibility of just being a wild animal. So I'll lead by saying that, but you'll see why, as we go through this, why none of us have truly 100% settled on that explanation. Unfortunately, both times that this happened, one time was in the middle of the night, yet no one else heard it. And the second time, I was home alone. The one time that I was home alone, we had a cat. His name was Bob. And he was kind of freaked out too while it was happening. So both instances were pretty much exactly the same as far as the experience goes, but the first time it happened, it was in the middle of the night. I woke up to this really weird sound. The only way that I know how to describe what it was, it's almost like if a cat was, hopped up on PCP and steroids, and it was underneath my bedroom. Because where we lived, my particular bedroom was elevated a little ways. So, of course, there's ductwork and stuff under there, right? It was like something was down there just screaming at the top of its lungs, rolling around. I could hear it hitting the ductwork every now and then. So then it's like, if you've ever heard two cats fight, then that's basically what it sounded like. But there was something wrong about the way that the actual sound was, because it sounded more like a dog, but still a cat. I don't really know how to describe it. There's when cats scream, they kind of have that, I won't demonstrate, but that high pitch kind of, the sound that cats make. And it can literally sound like a person screaming at the top of their lungs when they're really pissed. It was that kind of noise, but the pitch was way too low. It sounded more like a dog growling while also mimicking how cats fight. But there's two things that are weird about this. First of all, I could literally hear it hitting the ductwork and such. Yet, and all the noise and whatnot, my siblings' room was literally right on the other side of the wall. They never heard anything. The house also wasn't that large, so I would say that my parents on the other end of the house would definitely have heard it as well, but they worked all day, so it would surprise me less if they slept through it, because They were deadbeat tired on a regular basis. But you would at least think that somebody else would have heard it. But it just, there wasn't an explanation for it. I remember I got up and was even looking out the window, and while I was still looking out the window, there was only one way in and out from underneath the house. The noise was still happening, but then like shortly after I was looking out the window, it just stopped. I never saw anything run away. I never heard the noise again. I was up for the rest of the night. I was not falling back asleep. There's no way. Never heard it again. That night, that is. This time, it's only for the rest of that night, because defying the theme of the rest of this video so far, this actually did happen again, one more time, when I was home alone and Bob was there, Bob, our cat. I must have been playing video games. It was like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, broad daylight. It was overcast. I do remember that, but broad daylight. And suddenly it started up again. The exact same sound. It was like something was just underneath my room again. So, of course, at this point, it's broad daylight, right? So you're a lot braver when the sun is up. And so I went out, and I did not get close to the hole that led under the house. I grew up in the country. I know better. So, but I was on the porch, which was had enough room off of the far end of the porch where you could see the hole in its entirety. And I could hear the noises under the house, and suddenly they stopped. And this entire time, well, not my cat, my parents' cat, but you know what I mean? My cat was literally in the living room, and he wanted to go out with me when I tried to go out, but I stopped him. But his hair from his shoulder blades, his front legs on his back, all the way down his spine to right where the base of his tail was all standing like straight up. And it was just really weird. It was really weird. And it literally, again, just as quickly as it showed up, it just disappeared. This must have been like, I don't even think it was a month after the first time it happened, but this time it never happened again. So we're back on theme again. I don't know. It was really weird. Never see anything go in or out of the hole. Never see any signs of struggle or anything. Because that was the thing. I told my parents about this, but I remember my dad actually went under there with his flashlight, and he couldn't find any signs of anything. There wasn't anything dead. There wasn't like hair stuck on anything or anything like that. So I don't know. It was really weird. Really weird. All right. But I have one more story to tell, and this one did not happen where I grew up. At the time, I had a pretty good friend that kind of lived, I'd say maybe a couple of towns over, about 40 minutes away, 40, 50 minutes drive away. But I was driving out there on a regular basis because their father had hired me to help restore a house that they were trying to renovate. It was an estate, their parents, so the grandparents of my friend. But I was there to help move furniture, clean things up, restore parts of the house. I repainted some of the farm equipment as well, just odd jobs like that, pretty much anything that needed to be done. But one such task was painting the living room and the kitchen and the hallway down to the bedrooms. Well, the kitchen had a side door that led off into the living room, which then led to the front door. But no one ever used it. I don't even know if the door opened at that point or not, because the house was quite old. It needed a lot of work. So we always went through the side door, which led directly into the kitchen. Well, if you walk into the kitchen, the doorway into the living room is on your left, but then you go just a little further than that, and on the left side there was a closed door. That closed door led to the cellar. Before you think I'm going the cliche route of it being a scary basement, it wasn't actually a scary basement. It was a basement, but it wasn't scary. You'd go down into the basement, and it wasn't finished, so you could see the rafters, and there was concrete, and there was framing for walls. I don't know if there was plans to close it off at some point, and they just never did. I don't know, but there was framing for walls on the right half of the basement. On the left half, it was still completely wide open. But again, it was just the framing for walls. There was no drywall up or anything like that. So from one corner of the basement, you could see the entire basement. And the entire basement had light bulbs through it. So if you flicked on the switch, the entire basement lit up very brightly. Again, it was not a scary basement. There wasn't anything scary about it. And there was like some work tables that still had tools and some projects that were never finished on them. On the other side, there was the wood stack against the corner wall. Okay, so there's actually two things that happened in this house. I'll start with the lesser one. I was in the house alone. I would work there alone on a somewhat regular basis, because I would show up in the morning and then leave in the evening. And basically typical job kind of situation. But this time I was moving furniture all morning long and into the afternoon. Overworked myself, ended up very, very tired, and decided I was just going to do lighter tasks for the rest of the day so that I could actually drive home in one piece. So I would go into the cellar, grab a bunch of stuff, take it up the stairs into the kitchen, put it on the counter, clean it up over the sink, and then put it on the other side of the sink to be repackaged. I was facing at the kitchen sink, and I was cleaning off some brushes, and suddenly there was just this loud bang behind me. As you can imagine, when something like that happens, you are turning around faster than you knew your body physically could. What's funny, though, is that your brain is looking for something obvious. So when I quickly turned around, I didn't realize what it was at first. I was just staring at the door, and I kind of take a few steps forward, look to my right down the hallway. I make a small left and take a few paces, look in the living room. Nothing's tipped over, nothing looks broken. Then I walk back into the kitchen and I suddenly realize what it was. I left the cellar door open, and the bang I heard must have been the door closing because it was closed now. So here's the thing. Like I said, my influences of the paranormal are very, very professional, and so my brain wasn't going, scary thing happen, what scary thing makes scary thing happen. Instead, I started looking around the house for a window that was open. I was like, did a gust of wind just come through and slam this door shut? So I look out the window, and I don't see any wind whatsoever. But this house was kind of back in the woods a little bit, so I'm like, is it possible that it's not that windy here right now, but with a stronger gust, enough got through the trees to, you're starting to stretch the imagination at this point, but you're still trying to figure out what the heck would have caused it. Well, I didn't tell the homeowners this part because, but I opened up the door and then I purposely slammed it to see if it would sound exactly the same or not. And it sounded exactly the same. It was 100% a match. So then I go to the front door or not the front door, sorry, the side door, the one that connects to the kitchen. I went out that door, down the stairs, down the driveway to the road where the trees were no longer everywhere. And there's no wind there either. I'm a pirate now. And what was funny is that I looked to my right, and of course, no wind, none of the trees are moving, none of the grass is moving. There was a big wide open field right on the other side of the road. There wasn't any of the grass or anything out there moving. The clouds aren't moving quickly or anything. No signs of high winds or potential of gusts or anything. At that point, it's just kind of like that's really weird kind of situation. Fast forward about a month, and I'm there late because I'm trying to finish painting the kitchen, because of course, when you paint a room, it needs to dry for a little while, and when there's tons of commotion, moving things around or kicking up dust and debris, you can't really do it at the same time that you're doing everything else. In other words, it's better to just get it done and then leave it overnight. So I was there pretty late. It must have been about 9:30, 10 o'clock, somewhere around there. I had just finished up, and I was about to start cleaning the brushes. When my friend showed up, they were curious to know why I was there so late. So I explained it to them that I wanted to finish up the place so that it could dry overnight. And they were like, well, you're not doing any painting in the cellar, are you? And I kind of looked at them a little bit confused. Again, there's no drywall down there, so why would I be? That's probably why they were asking, though. Why would I be? And I told them no. So they were like, well, why do you have the lights on down there then? Now, that sounds a little bit weird, but come to find out later, their mother was down there earlier that day, and she distinctly remembered turning on the lights, but she didn't remember turning them off. So it's more than likely that she just forgot to turn off the lights before she left. So that part turned out not to be anything weird, more than likely. But it is the reason why I opened up the cellar door and went down there. And when I was down there, I was just kind of looking around, and I didn't really think anything of it. Well, my friend was there, so of course you got to kind of joke around a little bit. The door slamming thing had already happened. It had to do with the cellar door. I was now down in the cellar late at night. It was just too perfect. So I ended up just as a joke saying, "Is there anyone here?" And I heard a knock on one of the pieces of wood. At least I'm assuming that's what it was, because it sounded like somebody knocking their knuckles on a plank of wood. So I'm assuming that it was one of the framing pieces. I kind of chuckled a little bit. My friend's standing on the stairs, and they're like, "What the heck was that?" I start laughing because I figured it was them messing with me pretty much. But then when I got to the bottom of the stairs and looked up and I saw the look on their face, they were flushed. They were very scared. And so I was like, "Well, that was you knocking, wasn't it?" And they just shook their head. No, it wasn't. So I go back down to the basement. At this point, I'm thinking like somebody's down here and they're messing with me or something, you know. The back door was a door that we did use quite often. My friend's father would sometimes use it to just go down in there, grab something real quick, and then leave. So I was thinking maybe my friend's dad is down here and he's hiding in the corner somewhere or something. But like I said, the basement isn't very large and the entire thing is lit up. So it took like 5 seconds of looking around to realize that I was down there alone. So I decided to ask another question. I mean, why not? Is there somebody down here? Knock. And sure enough, I got a knock in response. Now, if you're not familiar with investigative techniques, normally in this situation, you want to start changing how many knocks mean what answer. So normally we'll do like 1 is yes, 2 is no, 3 is I don't know, and then you'll just mix them up as you're investigating. So, you know, you'll say that, "Is there anybody down here?" Knock once for yes, twice for no, and then you'll get a knock, and you'll be like, "So just to make sure, can you knock one more time to let me know that you're actually here?" Hear a knock. "Okay, can you knock 2 times to let me know that you're here?" 2 knocks. Okay, you've established that there's probably something there. Could it still be coincidence at that point? Absolutely. So, you know, you got to continue your questioning. So that's what I did. I asked, are you male? Are you a woman? I got consistent answers for this every single time I mixed up the answer or the questions. I got consistent knocks back that yes, I was talking to a man. I then began to ask how old it was, and I got up past 64, so we determined it was older than 64. I got no to every single variation of that question beforehand. I got yes to every variation of that question afterwards. And eventually, though, so my friend, I've been keeping their name and everything about them obscured for reasons I've already mentioned, but also for this reason. Because about halfway through this, I was about to start asking specific names. But before I did that, I asked a question that a lot of paranormal people say you should never ask, but I truly believe that most of the time if you're talking to an entity, then it's most likely a person. So I don't know why there would be taboo questions that you just don't ask, you know, to stay polite, obviously. But so I asked, "Did you pass away on this property?" And I got yes. So then I varied the question again, you know, "Did you pass away someplace else other than this property?" I got no. I changed how many knocks for the no. I got no again. So then I changed how many knocks for yes. I told them 3 knocks if they passed away on this property. And I got them, all 3 of them, right back to back right after that. At this point, even the hair on my arms was standing up, and I was used to this kind of stuff. My whole body like shifted gears or something. It was like my adrenaline system kicked in or something. I don't know. It was kind of strange. But that's when I hear a very meek and mild voice calling down to me. So I turn and I walk to the stairs and I look up them, because at this point I was standing over in the corner where I thought I was hearing the knocking noises. So that was the other weird thing. Very quickly, side note. Every time I walked to the part where I thought I was hearing the knocking from, the knocking suddenly sounded like it was on the other side of the room. So then I'd walk over there, and then it sounded like it was on the other side of the room again. It was very weird, especially since when I was standing over by where the wood framing is, I still heard what sounded like knuckles on planks of wood from the side of the room that didn't have any. It was very weird. But anyway, I go down to the bottom of the stairs and I look up, and my friend is standing up there like white as a ghost, covered in tears, begging to leave. So that's exactly what we did. I said goodbyes, I went upstairs, I finished cleaning off the brushes, and we left. Personally, I wish I could have stayed a little bit longer. Again, this was late at night though, and my friend was freaked out and they had to walk back to their house. I wasn't gonna make them go alone. So yeah, that was the end of that. To this day, the only time that I think I've had direct interaction with something that I couldn't see. It's one thing when you hear about it on like TV or whatnot, because that's the thing. Whenever you watch like internet videos or television or anything like that, there's always the possibility that they're faking it in one fashion or another, or they're elevating it or whatever. Because that's the thing. You would never know unless you're there yourself. It's kind of like this never-ending cycle of proof positive. The people, like skeptics, will be like, prove that it exists. So then you show them a full-blown apparition walking through somebody's living room in video format, and they go, oh yeah, nice Adobe After Effects. It's like, I know you can fake stuff with software, but this actually happened right in front of me, and they would still never believe it. And there's a lot of paranormal groups out there that claim that happens to them all the time. Now, could all of them be lying? Sure. Could they all be telling the truth? Sure. Could some of them be lying and some of them telling the truth? That's the most likely outcome. There's always ways to fake these things, and so it's hard to discern what is real and what isn't, and most of the time the only conclusion you can come to is that that could potentially be real. But when it happens to you in the room and there's nobody else there, I mean, in this case my friend was upstairs, but they weren't faking it. It's like, in a situation like that, it suddenly becomes extremely real in your mind. That is the one and only time that I can say that I've had that. You know, I don't have empirical evidence of it, but for me, I don't see any other explanation at this point. So that's without a doubt the most shocking thing that's ever happened to me as far as the paranormal is concerned. Even if you don't think it was an entity, even if you think it was all somehow some massive coincidence, it's very, very mysterious no matter what. We live in a weird world, and as that old adage goes, reality is stranger than fiction. So, yeah, could tell more of these stories. Again, I have had a lot of weird things happen to me, but those are by far the most interesting things that have happened. So, though I could tell you about times that other people in my life have had weird things happen to them, and there's one there, I swear where they work is haunted, and I want to spend a night there with a camera and an audio recorder. I want to so badly. So maybe we'll have more story times, or whatever the heck I'm going to call this. I don't even know what. I haven't even decided. But that's going to do it for this one. So like and share the video if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you want to see more. I do have a Ko-Fi and Patreon. No pressure though. It is linked in the description if you want to check it out though. Most of all though, I just hope that you have a great day. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. See ya.